poppin', B? Purpuck here, and welcome back to another episode of Race the Ramen, the show where I attempt to review something unscripted in the amount of time it takes to boil an instant ramen. And today we'll be taking a look at Beau is Afraid, showing now in theaters. Alright, we're going to start the timer right now. Okay, so, Beau is Afraid. This is the newest movie from director Ari Aster, who you may know from Midsummer and Hereditary. He's a horror guy, generally speaking, and while I'm not the biggest fan of his movies, I have seen both and enjoyed both, just the one time each, Midsummer and Hereditary. And I know that there are plenty of people that love his style and his movies to death. So, when I saw that A24 would be financing and releasing his newest movie, Beau is Afraid, which seemed like a bit of a trade-up for him, a slightly more comedic, bombastic sort of movie compared to Midsummer and Hereditary. Some sort of Charlie Kaufman-esque Synecdoche, New York, Anomalisa, I'm thinking of anything's type, allegorical, metaphorical sort of movie. I was kind of confused by what it was going for, but I was interested. So, kept my eyes peeled, and I've now seen it. And honestly, even after taking several days to, mentally digest what I witnessed, to compose myself for this review, I still find myself at a loss for words for a lot of things with this movie. Beau is Afraid is probably one of the most, inaccessible movies I have ever reviewed on this channel. Not that it doesn't have its audience or, a clear point, people it's trying to, speak to with its messages and what it's about. It's just that this whole movie, premise and all, every little bit of it, it's kind of abrasive. The whole thing is basically, and if you don't know, Joaquin Phoenix plays Beau, who is afraid. He's a man with extreme anxiety that kind of, dictates most of the things he does in his life. And he has to go home to visit his mother. And without spoiling, that's the basic plot, and it's about 3 hours of insane Kafka-esque torture. It's such a strange movie because I feel like I can tell easily what it's going for, what its message is and what its themes are, but at the same time, I'm still not sure. There's a certain lack of cohesion to the entire project. I think I mentioned this already, but it's 3 hours long, which it definitely didn't need to be. I don't mind long movies. If a movie's good enough, the length doesn't really bother me. But this felt too long. This did not need to be 3 entire hours. They could have probably cut 20 minutes or something and genuinely improved the flow of things. It's weird because there's a lot of scenes I like and a lot of sequences I like. Joaquin Phoenix as Beau is fantastic. He's one of the greatest actors working today, in my opinion, and this is no exception. He does great. Beau, the character, is not super interesting to me in the way he is, but his performance is like a boon to this whole thing. Patti LuPone plays his mother, who's very important in the story. Kind of a big source of his guilt and anxiety, kind of the driving force of everything. And for those who don't know, you might recognize Patti LuPone as Yellow Diamond from Steven Universe. She's great in this too. She's scary as hell, captivating and terrifying, and you kind of understand why the woman she is and the things she's done has had its impact on Beau as it has. But again, this movie is too long, and it's just too much. The whole thing is just the worst stuff that Beau thinks will happen, happening. It's like Murphy's Law made into a comedy of errors. It's like he's anxious someone will steal his keys out of his apartment door. That happens. He's afraid that a police officer is gonna pull his gun on him for no reason. That happens. He's afraid that people are secretly conspiring against him and judging him silently. And at a certain point, it became really confusing for me what was literal, what was metaphorical. I can understand that it's Beau's perspective of the world. There's a lot of stuff that's making him freak out. It's probably not literally what's happening, but by the end, the line between fantasy and reality was so blurred. I had serious trouble trying to decipher what was meant to be like a thing that was just actually happening in the movie versus something that might have happened or was an exaggerated version of what happened. And to me, it kind of makes the whole message and point of it kind of foggy. No matter what, I'd say this. I don't think it's a bad movie at all. Lots of good stuff in it. It's just that it's definitely too long and too much. Hopefully that gives you a decent impression of what I think of the movie. This is a seriously weird one. Like, this is one of the most bizarro, made for a very select audience kind of movie that I've talked about on this channel ever, so far at least. I mean, this is weirder than to 10. And that's about a lady who f***s a car. Like, Ari Aster has clearly made a very personal, one-for-me kind of movie. This is like the most expensive production A24 has ever had. $35 million. It's kind of bombing at the box office, hasn't even made back 10. So, I don't know. This movie, I think that Ari Aster succeeded in what he wanted to make, but at the same time, I'm like, is this what you wanted to make? It's so strange. It feels like it's doing exactly what it wants to do, but it's also still packed to the gills with too much crap. It's almost like, I get it. But there's still stuff of value to be gleaned from it, so I don't know. I would give Beau is Afraid a 7 out of 10. I really had to think about this one. I almost wanted to give it a 6. At one point, I was almost considering giving it a 5 because I was just so divided by it. And then thinking about it more, I found stuff to appreciate that I didn't quite the first time. But I'd say my biggest criticism of this movie, my two biggest criticisms, are, one, I think it's genuinely more interesting to discuss and talk about than it is to watch actively. And two, it's stressful. It's stressful and sad and full of fucked up things, and maybe you'll find some catharsis in the way it discusses these paranoid ideas and these neuroses. I related to plenty of this stuff, even if I didn't want to. That said, I don't blame you for, like, turning this off after 15 minutes, because it's insane. And if you aren't too excited to see it in theaters, it's probably out of most theaters by now, wait for a home video release, because a few bathroom breaks and some time to stare at yourself in the mirror every now and then would probably be useful watching this. Ugh, that was a mouthful. So was this entire movie. And you know what, real quick, while I'm on the subject, minor spoiler for Beau's Afraid, sort of, so if you don't want to hear this, click away. Okay, here I go. What is it with, like, between this and The Lighthouse, what is it with A24 financing the construction of eerie, horrifying genitalia that may or may not exist in the realm of reality in a character's mind? Seriously, I think that, like, as a society, we need to have a broader, like, cultural discussion about what the hell that's about.